imagine you've been married for 5 years.
Right.
You and your spouse are both active duty military. You built a life together. And you're basically operating under the assumption that the organization you serve will logically attempt to keep your family intact.
You would think so, yeah.
Right. But buried deep within Chapter 10 of this administrative handbook is a mathematical formula. And it views your marriage not as a bond, but as a complex operational liability.
A total liability to the system.
Exactly. Welcome to the Blue Suit Files.
Yeah.
The objective of this deep dive is explicit. We are examining the invisible algorithms that dictate human capital in the United States Air Force.
Yeah, we're going to analyze exactly how personnel are moved, how human skills are mathematically coded, and, the clinical consequences for assets that fail to maintain system compliance.
Right. And according to the Airmen Development and Testing Chart, the ADTC, a technical sergeant, actually has to comprehend Chapter 10 of Air Force Handbook 1, that's Assignments and Occupational Codes, precisely at Level B.
So, it is imperative that you understand the exact distinction of Level B comprehension here. The Air Force does not want you to simply, memorize this text.
Right, because that's just Level A.
Exactly. Level A is remembering. That's just the basic retrieval of facts, dates, definitions from memory. A Level A operator just knows what the rule is.
They compared it back.
Yeah, exactly. But Level B is understanding. So Level B requires you to construct meaning, interpret the data, classify the variables, and explain the underlying mechanisms.
It's a huge shift.
It is. It marks the definitive transition from merely memorizing the rules to understanding the architecture of the machine itself. You're no longer just a gear turning in the operation,
Right. You're expected to comprehend the logic driving the motor.
Exactly.
So to achieve this Level B comprehension, we can't simply read the handbook to you like a table of contents. I mean, we have to take the machine apart.
Piece by piece.
Right. We'll start by examining the overarching logic of how the assignment system moves bodies around the globe. Then we'll look at how the system classifies those bodies into specific data points.
Which is fascinating, honestly.
Oh, it really is. And finally, we'll show you how these isolated concepts interact to trigger, massive consequences for the enlisted force, and what you, as a technical sergeant, must do with this information.
So let's start with the engine itself, right? The assignment system.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, consider the sheer staggering scale of the United States Air Force. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of active duty personnel scattered across the globe.
Right. How do you decide who goes where?
Exactly. The absolute foundational premise established in sections 10.1 and 10.2 is that the assignments exist for one reason, and that is to satisfy national security requirements.
That is the prime directive.
The prime directive, yeah. The Air Force Personnel Center, AFPC, they manage this for the vast majority of the force. They act as the final approval authority for permanent changes of station for senior master sergeants and below.
And then for Chief Master Sergeants, that authority shifts over to the Air Force Executive Talent Management Office, ETMO.
Right, ETMO. So the system is totally centralized to ensure the mission dictates the movement. And the regulation explicitly states that the Air Force assigns a permanent change of station, or a PCS, on a, quote, voluntary basis to the maximum extent possible.
Okay, look at the deliberate phrasing of that sentence, though. To the maximum extent possible.
Yeah.
That is just a masterpiece of bureaucratic caveat. Voluntarism within this architecture is an illusion.
Right.
It's a preference. The mission is a mandate. I mean, the Air Force leverages this concept of a voluntary basis as a sort of morale lubricant,
Oh, absolutely. It's highly efficient to manage a workforce that believes it has agency in its destination.
Exactly. But the actual hard-coded logic of the assignment machine is designed to distribute assets involuntarily the very millisecond a manpower deficit dictates it.
Yeah, the text immediately covers its own tracks right after that. It states, when required, the USAF distributes involuntary assignments.
Right. So the system allows you to volunteer, provided your volunteering perfectly aligns with what the system already requires.
Right. And if it doesn't align,
your agency is immediately revoked.
It's gone. But the system also relies on predictability. Right. Once an assignment is loaded, the logistics network begins to turn. Funding is allocated, household goods shipments are scheduled, and the gaining units plan their manning rosters around the arrival of that specific asset.
It's a massive chain reaction.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this brings us to Section 10.3 regarding assignment cancellations. Because the system operates on these strict timelines. Once an airman is selected for a PCS and orders are published, assignments are not normally canceled within 60 days of the projected departure date.
Right. The efficiency of that global distribution network relies on that 60-day certainty.
Yeah. However, the regulation does provide an exception.
Mm-hmm.
Cancellations within that window may be considered if the assignment will cause hardship.
Hardship, yeah.
Right. And surely you'd think that is a mechanism designed to protect airmen facing genuine, unforeseen crises, right?
You would assume that, yeah. But you really have to observe the calculated ambiguity of the system here.
Mm-hmm.
The regulation deliberately does not define the metric for hardship. It states that the airman must prepare a written statement, fully justify the circumstances, coordinate it through their unit commander to the military personnel section, and then just await a decision from the assignment authority.
So they just leave the word hardship completely undefined.
Completely undefined. And by doing that, the system transfers the entire burden of proof onto the airman.
Wow.
It is a brilliant protective mechanism for the bureaucracy.
Because, I guess, if the Air Force provided a strict, itemized checklist for what constitutes a hardship, personnel could simply engineer their circumstances to meet those exact criteria.
Precisely. If hardship is just a math equation, someone will solve it to get out of an undesirable assignment to Minnow Air Force Base.
Right, right. So the vagueness ensures the system retains absolute authority to deny the cancellation.
Exactly. You have to prove your suffering meets an invisible threshold that the system can just shift at will. It forces the individual to beg the machine for clemency, which just confirms exactly why the airman is required to remain compliant with the initial order in the first place.
That is chilling. So that brings us to how the machine actually selects who gets the order in the first place, right? Section 10.4 details the factors for the distribution of personnel. Filling a valid manpower requirement is obviously the primary factor.
Right. The system looks at an empty billet and looks for an airman of the correct grade and Air Force specialty code to fill it.
That the algorithm utilizes additional parameters to plug highly critical specialized holes. And one of the most powerful parameters is the Special Experience Identifier, or SEI.
Yeah, the SEI is crucial.
The system uses the SEI in conjunction with standard codes to match uniquely qualified airmen to jobs with very specific requirements.
Right, so the SEI basically functions as a secondary tracking matrix. A standard classification code might tell the system that an individual is a jet engine mechanic. But what if a contingency operation requires a mechanic who specifically knows how to repair a highly classified propulsion system in an austere Arctic environment?
Right, a standard classification fails to filter that specific talent.
Exactly. The SEI rapidly identifies the exact asset required. It's a targeted extraction tool used by the system when standard assignment protocols are just too blunt.
Another critical override parameter is the security access requirement.
Ah, this is a big one.
Right, because standard assignment protocols dictate selection based on normal PCS eligibility criteria, like, who has been on station the longest.
Yeah, time on station.
Right. However, urgency frequently dictates deviations from standard operating procedures. Think of the security access requirement override as, like, emergency room triage.
That's a great analogy.
If a patient arrives with a catastrophic arterial bleed, the nurses do not ask him to take a number and sit in the waiting room while they process sprained ankles.
Right, they bypass the queue to apply immediate intervention.
Exactly. And the assignment system does the exact same thing for classified positions. When a top-secret billet requires immediate staffing, the system will completely bypass the standard eligibility queues to extract an airman who already possesses the required security access.
It just bypasses the time-consuming background investigation process entirely to stop the operational bleeding.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how the system handles security. Now observe how it handles human relationships.
Okay.
Let's return to the scenario we opened with, the joined spouse program.
Right. The dual military couples.
Yeah. So the regulation dictates that military couples will be considered for assignments where they can maintain a joint residence, provided they fill valid manning requirements and perform duties requiring their trained skills.
Okay, so the system attempts to group compatible assets together.
It attempts to, yes. However, you must analyze the subsequent warning embedded in the regulation. It explicitly states, and this is a quote, "Military couples should not make decisions on future service, career development, or family planning based on the assumption they will always be assigned to the same location."
Wow. That is an incredibly blunt statement for an administrative handbook.
It really is. It is a clinical liability waiver.
Yeah.
The Air Force is formally insulating its algorithms from the emotional fallout of dual military assignments. The machine assigns assets based purely on operational utility.
Right, so if one spouse is the cyber warfare operator required at Fort Meade, and the other is a heavy aircraft mechanic required at Travis Air Force Base, the operational requirements diverge.
And the couple will be separated. The system literally forces you to acknowledge in writing that your family structure is subordinate to the manpower spreadsheet.
That mathematical approach to human capital is it's most evident in Section 10.5, I think, which governs service retainability.
Oh, absolutely. Time and money.
Yes, the logic here is grounded entirely in time and money. A permanent change of station is a massive financial investment by the United States government.
It's huge.
Paying for aircraft, moving household goods across oceans, providing per diem and travel allowances for dependents. It costs tens of thousands of dollars to relocate a single family.
Right. And to justify that massive expenditure, the system requires a guaranteed yield on its investment.
Exactly, in the form of service retainability. The algorithms dictate specific returns based on the exact type of move.
Yeah, the required retainability fluctuates based on system cost and location stability. Let's examine the data parameters here. For a consecutive overseas tour, or COT, the airman is required to complete the full prescribed tour at the current overseas location and the full prescribed tour at the new overseas location.
The system demands maximum utilization of the asset while deployed abroad.
Exactly. And for dependent-accompanied overseas tours, the required retainability is significantly longer than an unaccompanied tour.
Well, because if the system is going to pay the exorbitant costs to fly a spouse and 3 children to, say, Kadena Air Base in Japan, and pay for their housing and schooling, the system demands more labor from the active duty member to amortize that cost.
Exactly. The system mandates that electing to serve the longer accompanied tour requires the airman to obtain the obligated service retainability to offset the financial burden of moving those dependents.
It is a direct transaction.
Very direct. And reassignment from overseas returning to the continental United States, or CONUS, requires at least 12 months of obligated service retainability.
Okay.
A permanent change of station from CONUS to CONUS requires a strict 24 months of retainability, regardless of your career status.
Right. The expectation is that when the machine issues an assignment, the airman will immediately take the necessary administrative steps, like, extending their enlistment contract, to acquire the retainability required to execute the order.
And this is exactly where the consequences of failing to understand the machine become incredibly severe. Yeah. Declining to obtain retainability is not a neutral act within this system. You can't simply say, I do not want to extend my contract, so I will just stay at my current base.
Right. The system views a lack of retainability as non-compliance.
Yes, and it triggers automatic punitive reactions. If an airman lacks retainability and officially declines to obtain it, the system initiates a purge sequence.
A purge sequence. And the regulation is uncompromising on this.
Totally uncompromising.
The career airman immediately becomes ineligible for promotion. They become ineligible for reenlistment.
Right.
If they're eligible for retirement, they may be forced to retire instead of accepting the PCS.
And it goes even further than that. If they are stationed overseas and fail to obtain the 12 months of retainability required to return to the continental United States, they will be trapped in the overseas area until their precise date of separation.
Wow.
The machine automatically neutralizes non-compliant assets. It removes your upward mobility, it removes your ability to sign a new contract, and it processes your exit from the organization.
So to manage the frequency of these movements, and provide a baseline of stability, the system employs time on station requirements, which are outlined in Section 10.6.
Right, TOS.
Right. The fundamental rule for a CONUS to CONUS permanent change of station is that career airmen must have at least 48 months of time on station.
4 years.
Exactly. The system will not generally move you stateside if you have been at your current base for less than 4 years. For a CONUS to overseas move, a career airman requires 24 months of time on station.
Okay, so to navigate this timeline and have some input on their destination, airmen interface with the system through Section 10.7, the Enlisted Quarterly Assignments Listing, or EQUAL.
Right. EQUAL provides a listing of assignment requirements for upcoming cycles.
Mm-hmm.
It is the dashboard where the airman views the needs of the machine.
And then there's EQUAL Plus, which advertises specialized requirements.
Oh, wait.
Special duty, joint assignments, short notice overseas assignments, and all Chief Master Sergeant assignments.
Yeah, so it allows an airman to align their personal preferences with the actual advertised needs of the Air Force. You look at Equal, you see the Air Force needs staff sergeants in Germany, and you update your preference sheet to match.
But you have to understand the clinical allocation of responsibility here.
What do you mean?
Well, the text mandates that each airman is individually responsible for the currency and accuracy of their assignment preferences.
Ah, right.
The system will not audit your life. The algorithm doesn't know if you got married last month or if you achieved a new skill level that alters your eligibility.
It just looks at the data points.
Exactly. If you fail to update your preferences in the database, the system will process you based on outdated data. You'll be assigned to a location you no longer want, or you will be bypassed for an opportunity you desperately need, entirely based on the parameters you failed to maintain.
Because the machine processes the ghost of who you used to be.
That is exactly it. The machine processes a ghost.
That's incredible. Now, the system demands constant movement and optimization, sure, but it also mathematically recognizes that extreme turbulence damages the long-term viability of the human asset. Right?
A broken airman cannot generate combat power.
Exactly. Therefore, Section 10.9 outlines deferments. Deferments are authorized to maintain stability during periods of observation, rehabilitation, or to allow an airman to resolve severe short-term problems.
The machine hits pause on your movement to preserve your future utility.
Right.
So let's analyze the humanitarian reassignment or deferment. The system allows an airman to pause their movement to resolve severe short-term problems involving a family member.
Yep.
However, the system defines short-term and family member with absolute chilling rigidity.
How so?
Well, the problem must be resolvable within a reasonable period, which the regulation normally defines as exactly 12 months.
Not 13.
Nope. If the problem requires 18 months to resolve, it falls outside the algorithmic parameters of a humanitarian deferment.
Wow.
More importantly, look at the definition of a family member. It is strictly restricted to a spouse, children, parents-in-law, and those who have served in loco parentis.
Right, and the regulation defines in loco parentis as someone who has exercised parental rights and responsibilities in place of a natural parent for at least 5 years before the airman's or spouse's 21st birthday.
Yeah, I really want you to observe the clinical precision of that metric.
5 years.
5 years is the absolute minimum threshold. The system quantifies parental bonds. If an individual took you into their home, fed you, housed you, and raised you for 4 years and 11 months before your 21st birthday...
They are a mathematical failure under this regulation.
Exactly. If they fall severely ill, your deferment will be denied. The machine does not recognize their parentage because it is 1 month short of the data requirement.
That is just, wow.
And furthermore, note the explicit exclusion of siblings.
Oh, right. Brothers and sisters are not included in the baseline definition of a family member for humanitarian consideration.
No, they're not.
The system only permits intervention for a sibling if they have a terminal illness.
Yes. The bureaucracy is generous enough to allow you to visit a dying brother, but even then, it's processed as an exception to policy.
Which means it requires a waiver.
It requires a waiver to override the core logic. This demonstrates the system's strict boundary management. It will not halt its global logistics operations for standard familial distress outside the core systemic definition.
So like your sister having a difficult pregnancy does not compute as a valid variable to stop a permanent change of station.
Not at all. It doesn't compute.
Unbelievable. And a similar logic governs the Exceptional Family Member Program, or EFMP.
Right.
EFMP enrollment is mandatory if an airman has a spouse or child requiring long-term or permanent special medical or educational care. When a condition is newly identified, the system will issue a deferment, usually 12 months, for an airman to establish a special medical or educational program for their dependent.
Yeah, and you must communicate the harsh reality of EFMP to your subordinates, because this is where many airmen feel completely swindled by the system.
I could imagine.
The regulation explicitly states again, quote, "This program is not a base of choice program."
But I'm sure many personnel believe EFMP guarantees they will be stationed in a desirable location with premium medical facilities, right? Like San Antonio or Washington, D.C.
Oh, absolutely they do. But that is false. The system calculates a Venn diagram. Circle A is the specific medical capability required by the family. Circle B is the Air Force's current manpower deficit.
Okay.
The system will only place the asset where those two circles intersect. An airman does not choose where they go. The algorithm outputs a singular destination that solves both the medical requirement and the systemic manning shortage.
So if the only base that meets both criteria is an isolated installation in the middle of the desert.
That is exactly where the asset is deployed.
Brutal. Now, in cases of severe trauma, the system utilizes Section 10.10, expedited transfers.
Yeah.
The Air Force offers expedited transfers to eligible airmen who file an unrestricted report for sexual assault, stalking, or domestic violence. And this also applies if an adult military dependent makes an allegation of non-domestic abuse sexual assault, provided there is a military nexus.
So the objective of an expedited transfer is clinical efficiency. The system recognizes that a hostile environment fundamentally destroys the operational capability of the asset.
Right.
The goal is a timely reassignment with minimal disruption to the airman's career and family. And to achieve this immediate extraction, the system requires the rapid removal of all assignment action codes from the airman's personnel file.
Because those codes normally block movement, right?
Yeah.
They enforce the time on station rules we discussed earlier.
Exactly. By stripping the data clean, the system bypasses the standard eligibility parameters, clearing the path so the asset can be rapidly relocated and preserved.
It solves a human crisis by manipulating the database.
That's exactly what it's doing.
So if the system is designed to move you, pause you, or purge you based on these complex formulas, how does it even know who you are?
Good question.
I mean, it doesn't look at your name. It doesn't look at your personality. To distribute assets efficiently, the system must first classify them.
Right.
And this is governed by Section 10.1 and 10.1. The Air Force Enlisted Classification Directory, the AFECD, reduces a human being's professional existence, capabilities, and operational value to a 5-digit alphanumeric sequence.
The Air Force Specialty Code, or AFSC.
Exactly.
Look at how this formula is built, because it is literally the only language the machine actually speaks. It consists of 5 distinct positions.
Right, let's break it down.
Okay, so the first digit represents the career group. That's the massive umbrella of operations. The second digit represents the utilization field, the specific branch within that group.
Okay.
The third digit represents the functional area or subdivision. Now, the fourth digit represents the skill level.
And this is critical, right?
Highly critical. It tracks your progression. 1 is for helper, 3 is for apprentice, 5 is for journeyman, 7 is for craftsman, 9 is for superintendent, and 0 is for chief enlisted manager.
And then the 5th digit represents the specific AFSC.
Exactly. Furthermore, the system applies alpha prefixes to denote special qualifications or systems not restricted to a single AFSC.
Like a T prefix, for example, denotes a formal training instructor.
Right. And alpha suffixes, or shredouts, denote positions associated with particular, highly specialized equipment within a single specialty.
So you're not just a mechanic.
No, you are a 2A651C, an airspace propulsion journeyman specifically shredded out to the TF-34 engine.
Incredible precision. And the system divides the operational environment into distinct career groups based on that first digit we talked about.
Right.
So 1X represents operations, 2X represents logistics, 3X represents support, 4X represents medical, 5X represents paralegal and religious affairs, 6X represents contracting and financial, 7X represents special investigations, 8X represents special duty identifiers, and 9X represents reporting identifiers.
So we really must execute an analytical deep dive into these classifications to show how the system prioritizes and separates its functions.
Let's do it.
Consider the cyber domain. The system does not view cyber as a monolithic entity. It deliberately splits cyber operations into 2 deeply distinct occupational codes based on their systemic function.
Okay, so 1B and 1D.
Yes. 1D is cyber warfare. The text defines this as developing and sustaining capabilities to defend national interests from attack and to create effects in the cyberspace domain.
Create effects. That's an offensive designation.
Highly offensive. It is focused on projecting power and achieving combatant command objectives. It is the sword.
Right.
In contrast, 1D is cyber defense operations. This code manages defensive cyber operations, surveying, securing, protecting, and preserving data and networks.
It's the shield.
Exactly. The system isolates the offensive strike capability from the defensive preservation capability to ensure specialized talent management in each vector. If you cross those streams, the machine loses its precision.
That makes total sense. And look at the 1Z classification. Special warfare.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
It is. The system defines the Airmen of Special Warfare as the Air Force's premier ground maneuver element. They operate within the Joint and Combined Force, but analyze the specific language the regulation uses to describe their systemic function.
What does it say?
The text states they provide the connective tissue required to bind multiple domains.
Connective tissue?
Yes. The system literally views these human operators as biological interfaces. They are deployed into hostile territory to link air, space, cyber, and land operations, facilitating precision strike and personnel recovery capability.
They are the human routers for lethal force.
The human routers, exactly.
We must also examine the stark distinctions within the support group, the 3X codes.
Okay, like 3E and 3P.
Yeah. So 3E designates civil engineers. They operate utility systems, pour concrete, and drive heavy equipment. But the system categorizes 3E primarily as a contingency-related career field.
Right, they are the designated disaster response force.
Exactly. Their true algorithmic value is executing explosive ordnance disposal and chemical warfare defense bed-down procedures. They are programmed to rebuild a runway after a biological attack.
Okay, and then compare that to 3P, security forces.
Right. The 3P code is the military police function. The critical distinction, the reason they are separated from the engineers, is that 3P duties explicitly require the use of force.
Lethal authority.
Yes. The 3P code authorizes an asset up to and including the use of deadly force for installation security and nuclear weapon system security. Your AFSC literally dictates your legal and lethal authority within the system.
But what happens when an asset doesn't fit within these established operational parameters? Like, what if they don't have a specific box?
That's where the 9X comes in. The system categorizes them under a 9X reporting identifier.
Okay, so the 9X code is the catch-all classification.
Yes. It is used for authorizations and individual enlisted airmen who are not identifiable in the standard classification structure and for whom specialty descriptions are not written in the directory.
It's basically the database equivalent of a miscellaneous folder.
Exactly. It allows the system to track an anomaly without breaking the primary classification logic.
That's brilliant, honestly. And the system utilizes entirely separate apparatuses for unique operational requirements, too. Section 10.13 details Air National Guard Strength Management.
Right, the ANG.
Yeah. The Air National Guard operates a dedicated recruiting and retention infrastructure that is completely separate from the regular Air Force, or RAJF.
And notice the language used in that section.
Well, the ANG utilizes 3 specific roles to maintain its numbers. The Production Recruiter Retainer, or PRR, conducts the actual recruiting. They counsel applicants, initiate strategic plans, and conduct sales promotional projects.
Sales promotional projects.
Right. Then the Recruiting Retention Manager, the RRM, develops annual unit recruiting plans, establishes advertising initiatives, supervises the PRRs, and serves as the resource advisor for marketing funds.
Marketing funds.
And finally, the Recruiting Retention Superintendent, or RRS, maintains managerial oversight of all state ANG recruiting, manages manpower, and assists in the management of the advertising budget.
It is a highly corporate, metric-driven structure. The regulation uses terminology like production, sales promotional projects, marketing data, and advertising support.
It sounds like a business.
It is. The ANG recruiting structure operates exactly like an internal corporate sales division. It relies on community relations and localized centers of influence.
So it operates on a completely different set of incentives and metrics than the rigid, globally distributed classification protocols of the regular Air Force.
Completely different.
Now, within the regular Air Force, the system identifies its elite assets through Section 10.14. Enlisted Special Duties, coded as the 8X Special Duty Identifiers, or SDIs.
The 8X codes.
Right. SDIs apply to authorizations for enlisted airmen performing tasks on a semi-permanent or permanent duty basis outside their primary AFSC.
So this includes like the 8A100 Career Assistance Advisor, the 8B1000 Military Training Instructor, the 8C1000 Military and Family Readiness Center Readiness NCO, and of course, the 8F1000 First Sergeant.
Exactly. The machine extracts you from your primary job to perform a specialized, highly visible function.
And you really need to analyze the nomination mechanism for these developmental special duties.
Okay,
The regulation states that commanders nominate their best airmen because these positions require unique leadership roles. The text explicitly demands that candidates must be ambassadors and role models for USAF core values and discipline.
Okay, so they want the best of the best.
But let's look at what is actually happening mathematically here. The system uses the 8X codes as a stringent quality control and replication mechanism.
Replication mechanism.
Yes. It extracts highly compliant, high-performing assets from their primary operational codes and repositions them.
Ah, I see.
It places them into 8B1000 roles to mold the raw data of the next generation of recruits. It places them into 8,000 first sergeant roles or 8,000 inspector general superintendent roles to enforce systemic discipline upon the rest of the force.
Wow. So the system identifies its most efficient, flawless data points and utilizes them to ensure institutional continuity across the entire matrix.
That is exactly what it does. It copies and pastes its best code.
That is incredible. And this brings us to the most critical phase of Level B comprehension, connecting the dots.
Right.
How do these seemingly isolated concepts actually relate? We've examined Chapter 10A, which dictates assignments, and Chapter 10B, which dictates occupational codes. You have to understand that this is a closed-loop system.
Closed loop.
Your code dictates your movement, and your movement alters your code.
Yes. And the fundamental correlation you really must grasp here is between skill level and grade.
Okay, explain that.
So as a technical sergeant, you are allocated against a 7-skill level requirement. The system expects a technical sergeant to be a fully qualified craftsman in their control AFSC.
Right.
However, what happens if an asset retrains or is reclassified into a new career field?
Oh, they drop, right?
Exactly. They create an incompatible grade and skill level. For example, a 7-level technical sergeant who retrains into a new AFSC drops to a 3-skill level apprentice in that specific job.
Right, because they don't know how to perform the core functions of the new specialty yet.
But the assignment algorithm does not care about your localized ignorance.
It doesn't care at all.
No. The regulation dictates that airmen with an incompatible grade and skill level are allocated against requirements commensurate with their grade.
Their grade, so it looks at the rank, not the skill.
Exactly. The system sees the rank of technical sergeant, and it assigns that newly retrained apprentice to a position demanding 7-skill level leadership and proficiency.
Oh, wow.
The machine forces the individual to catch up to the system's expectations immediately. The machine does not pause for your learning curve.
It places you in the required slot, and if you fail to perform,
You are purged.
you are purged. Let's trace the domino effect of choices within this closed-loop algorithm. Because a single decision made by an airman manipulates multiple variables across the Air Force Personnel Center's databases simultaneously.
Oh yeah, it cascades.
Suppose an enlisted airman utilizes the Voluntary Stabilized Base Assignment Program. They volunteer for an assignment to a historically hard-to-fill location, perhaps a remote base in North Dakota, in exchange for a stabilized, guaranteed tour length.
Okay, so by doing so, they have manipulated their time on station metric.
Right.
They have locked that variable.
Now, suppose that hard-to-fill location is overseas, and the airman volunteers for an extended long overseas tour, which is exactly what it sounds like. You tell the machine, I will stay in this foreign country for an extra 12 months.
That single choice immediately alters their retainability requirement under Section 10.5.
Because it's an extended tour.
Exactly. The system now demands more time to justify the stabilized assignment. To meet this new mathematical requirement, the airman is forced to take administrative action. They must either extend their current enlistment or fully re-enlist.
And as the regulation explicitly notes, that extension or re-enlistment directly impacts their selective retention bonus calculation.
Yes.
If they extend rather than re-enlist, they might forfeit thousands of dollars in bonus money.
Precisely. And this is the trap. The airmen thought they were simply choosing a location to gain some geographical stability for their family.
Right.
But in reality, they engaged a complex sequence of algorithms that rewrote their time on station, altered their retainability expiration date, changed their contract status, and completely modified their financial compensation.
Every choice is a data input that triggers a cascading systemic output.
You cannot pull one thread without unraveling the entire algorithm.
That is profound. And this leads us directly to the key takeaways, because we must return to our primary objective, applying this Level B comprehension as a technical sergeant. The Air Force does not require you to simply memorize these rules to pass a promotion test. You are required to construct meaning for your subordinates.
You are the interface.
Exactly. You are the critical interface between the cold, indifferent logic of Chapter 10 and the human airman attempting to navigate it.
You must be able to translate the code for them.
Right.
When a first-term airman comes into your office absolutely devastated that their base of preference, or BOP, was denied, you cannot offer them empty platitudes.
You can't just say, oh, the system messed up.
No, you cannot tell them the system just made a mistake. You must explain the algorithm. You must inform them that while first-term airmen may request a BOP as a retention incentive, the needs of the Air Force and valid manpower requirements inherently and permanently override volunteer status.
You have to be blunt about it.
Yes. When a career airman with 23 months of retainability is tasked over for a CONUS to CONUS permanent change of station, and they are furious because they wanted that assignment, you must explain the math.
The math demands 24 months.
Exactly. The system demands exactly 24 months to amortize the cost of the move. 23 months is a mathematical failure condition, and the system instantly bypasses them for a compliant asset.
So you are fundamentally responsible for managing their expectations.
You have to.
When a dual military couple in your flight is denied a joint spouse assignment and they are facing geographic separation, you must point to the clinical reality of the regulation. You must remind them of the liability waiver they agreed to upon entering the system.
The warning label.
Right. You must explain that future service is not based on the assumption they will be stationed together and that their operational capabilities simply diverge at this point in their careers.
And look, failure to execute this translation has catastrophic systemic consequences.
How so?
If you fail to explain the why behind the regulations, the airmen will inevitably perceive the system as malicious rather than merely indifferent.
Oh, they'll think it's personal.
Yes, they will believe the Air Force is actively trying to ruin their lives. And this loss of faith degrades retention. It destroys operational readiness.
They just give up.
If an airman believes the machine is broken or out to get them, they will stop maintaining their equal preferences. They will fail to obtain necessary retainability out of spite.
And subsequently, they will be purged from the ranks by the automated protocols we just discussed.
Exactly. Your level B comprehension is literally the only thing preventing their systemic termination. You are their translator.
Well, mission accomplished. We have successfully extracted the level B architecture of assignments and occupational codes.
We really broke it down.
We analyzed the algorithms, the classifications, and the strict operational parameters that govern the movement and utilization of the enlisted force.
So I leave you with this final critical perspective.
Okay.
Chapter 10 of Air Force Handbook 1 is not a guidebook. It is not a list of helpful suggestions for a successful career. It is the raw, uncompromising source code of a massive bureaucracy.
The source code.
The system does not view an airman as a human being with aspirations, anxieties, or a family. It views an airman as a matrix of data points. You are a 5-digit AFSC. You are a time on station metric. You are a retainability expiration date.
Just variables.
Just variables. And the algorithms process this data without emotion, without malice, and without empathy. If you do not understand your own data, if you do not comprehend exactly how your occupational codes interact with the global assignment machine, you cannot possibly navigate the system.
You'll just be run over by it.
You will simply be processed by it. Audit your codes. Check your retainability. Understand your exact coordinates on the spreadsheet at all times because the machine is always calculating its next move.
We conclude this deep dive into the architecture of Chapter 10. We invite you to return for our next extraction of the regulations, where we will continue to decode the invisible systems that govern our operations. Stay sharp and know your data.